Kickstarter began with Perry Chen, first having the idea for it in 2001, 2002. He was trying to throw a concert in New Orleans where he was living, and he was going to have to front about $20,000 to do it. And this was a lot of money to put up. And so instead he thought, what if I could propose the idea for the concert online? People would put up their credit cards to buy tickets, but no one would be charged unless the show sold out. This was a way that he wasn't the one making this decision, but rather everyone together could make this decision. And so he shared that idea with me in 2005 when we became friends. We met Charles Adler about a year later, who's a designer, and the three of us started working on trying to make this idea real. Our biggest inspiration was just seeing that creative projects, people trying to put new ideas into the world, they could only get funding if their idea had the potential to make someone else money. And investors looking for a return, a financial return. So the only ideas that were getting funded were ones that could be financially profitable. But from our experience as creative people, like most ideas are just ideas. It's this thing that's in your head that you're trying to manifest in the real world. And the idea that that creation must be profitable is like this additional layer of difficulty and even distraction from the thing you're trying to make. So the core idea behind Kickstarter was, what if people put up money for projects? There's no financial upside. It's just because they like the person. They're inspired by the project. They think the world is better if this exists. And we thought that would intentionally lower the bar for what's possible and then allow a much more diverse, weirder universe of creative ideas to happen. That's really is what's happened. And I think the core is in changing the why behind something's existence. The Kickstarter projects don't exist to be financially maximizing. They exist to be creatively maximizing, communally maximizing, just to express ideas as best we know how. And I just think that's where the best ideas begin, and where they grow from there, who can tell? We had our mix of like grandiose visions of what we hoped it could be, and we also were just terrified that no one would care. You're vacillating between those things. But 10 years in, I think it's exceeded any expectation we would have had. The notion of lots of people coming together for collective action just builds on what's so great about the internet, on its best qualities, and the degree to which that idea has been validated on Kickstarter and then through other crowdfunding sites emerging after us. It's not something that's going to go away. It's really proven its usefulness. And really based on a fundamentally different way of looking at the world. This money's being pulled together just to make things happen. It's not looking for a financial outcome. It's just to try to make something happen. And according to a rational economic theory, this is impossible, but yet it's happening to the tune of billions of dollars changing hands. Kickstarter was an idea that needed to be a business to succeed. But our goal was not to be entrepreneurs. We were just compelled by this idea. And so you're just sort of following that path, and sort of step by step, we learned what it was to run a business. We learned what it was to be an entrepreneur. We had that weekly reset of, now this is the new thing you have to learn. That made things often difficult, but it also meant that we were able to look at how we built our organization with fresh eyes. And we didn't just take every industry standard and build a cookie cutter organization. We really worked hard to try to define it according to what felt true to us and to this idea. Kickstarter's goal was not to profit maximize. It wasn't trying to make as much money as possible. And even we as founders had said, we don't want to run the business and turn it into some sort of personal lottery ticket. We don't want to sell out. We don't want to go public or cash out. The idea is to build something for the long term. Kickstarter converted to become a public benefit corporation. And a PBC is a legal category of a for-profit company that is required to balance shareholder interests with producing a positive benefit for society. But really, we were able to take the things that had always been different about us and build them into a legal structure and framework for the company that defines how it must act and really defines what it will be for generations to come. So I think that's an example of trying to not just talk the talk, but trying to walk the walk, and thinking about how our decisions could be a potential role model for generations of entrepreneurs to come. who maybe like us didn't see themselves in the traditional entrepreneurial framework. That's something that we felt allergic to. So instead, we had to create our own path. But we did that explicitly hoping that this was a path that others could follow, and that might lead to a new sort of business and really just a different way of thinking about our collective responsibilities. The moment that I first remember feeling that Kickstarter was working was actually in the very first week. It was years of trying to get the site off the ground, and I think it was maybe the third or fourth day that we were live that a project reached its funding goal for the first time. And it was from someone named Dark Pony, and the project was called Drawing for Dollars. And it was, if you give me $5, I'll draw you a picture of something. And it had 3 backers and $35 raised, which sounds modest, and it is modest, but it was the first time the system worked. On the back end, these credit cards were charged, money was moving to someone's account. We didn't know the people involved in the project. There are all these sorts of ways that it was just an amazing validation, even if it was just a $35 one. But that proved that the model could work. That proved that people understood what we were doing. And really, once that happened, I don't know, I just assumed it would keep working. To anyone that has that thought or idea that's just alive in them, that they can't keep quiet, I would encourage them to listen to that. I also would encourage them to be patient. The process of Kickstarter being alive, it looks like a straight line success maybe at this point, but it was 4 years after I got involved to Kickstarter launching. And, Perry and Charles were working very hard to make it happen during that time, but it wasn't easy, and we had to find our way. There was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of moments of real doubt, a lot of moments where you feel tempted to betray your values for something that seems satisfying in the short term. And really the only way to save yourself from that is to have that patience, that longer term vision, that sense of what will most matter is X. And so for us with Kickstarter, what would most matter would be Kickstarter being meaningful over the long run. And so having those sorts of ideas, I think, will just produce the best version of yourself. And those sorts of ideas are things that will also bring amazing people to join you. If your goal is more opportunistic, if your goal is more financial, then I think that that's certainly a reason why many people start businesses. But I don't think that will be as successful in the long run. I think you may find that even after you achieve your dream of raising a certain amount of money or getting a certain award, that won't satisfy that voice you have inside. And what you'll end up doing in a way that's very unhelpful to yourself is you'll just set a higher bar and delay your satisfaction. And so it's a hard trap. It's an easy one to get stuck in, and it's one that I've been trapped in the past as well. So it's having that longer term vision, that sense of purpose that pulls you forward, that is going to get the best version of you, and it's going to let you wake up being excited about whatever that project is every day. I've written a book called This Could Be Our Future, a manifesto for a more generous world. And it's about how we came to believe that the right choice in any decision is whichever option makes the most money. How this idea that I call financial maximization became the default setting behind many of the choices in our world. You can imagine that maybe about 50 years ago, the world operated according to a sense of moral values, what's right or wrong, what's most beneficial. And over time, that transitioned into a focus on financial value, what will make the most money, what we can grow and optimize. So the measured values surpass the not measured values. And this has really remade our world. In the book, I write about how the explosion of movie sequels, the consolidation of radio stations, the flat wages for workers since the 1970s, that all of these things ultimately have their roots in this belief that growing top-line financial value is the most rational thing that we could do. But the mistake we make is thinking that this is how the world has always been and always must be. But this is not that old of an idea. It's about 50 years old, and I believe just very strongly that this is something that we can change. So in the book, I lay out the theory and the sort of the history of that idea, and I also introduce what I think is a new way of thinking about the future. I introduce an idea I call bentoism, which is a way to define our self-interest. So if you imagine we visualize self-interest now using what in Silicon Valley they call a hockey stick graph, a chart where a line is going up and to the right so fast it just slopes right up. And so this is our idea of success. This is how we visualize our self-interest. But one day I'd drawn one of these charts in my notebook, just doodling, and it suddenly occurred to me that both of these axes on this chart keep going, that this hockey stick chart is just a much smaller slice of a bigger picture. So the x-axis measuring time, it goes from now all the way into the future. And the y-axis of the hockey stick chart, it also keeps going. That measures our self-interest, and it goes from me to us. And so our self-interest isn't just this one space right here, it's actually a whole 2x2 of spaces to think about. There's our now me, what I want and need right now. There's future me, the older, gray, wrinkled version of myself that made all the right choices and lived the life of the obituary I wish I could have. There's also now us, our friends, our families, our coworkers, our neighbors, the people that we rely on and who rely on us. And finally, there's future us, our children and everybody else's children too. So every decision we make impacts all of these spaces. We have footprints everywhere. But today we believe that only this now me space is the rational one. Everything else is hard to perceive or understand. So I call this way of seeing bentoism, like a Japanese bento box. So the bento was an amazing innovation about 1,000 years ago because it was a compartment that had 4 separate compartments inside of it and a lid. And so the bento allowed a Japanese worker or traveler to carry a lunch with a variety of dishes, a balanced meal. And the bento also honors the Japanese dieting philosophy called hara hachi bu, which says the goal of a meal is to be 80% full. That way you're still hungry for tomorrow. So bentoism is the same idea for our self-interest and our decisions, a way to not just maximize for this meal, for right now, but to leave space for the people we rely on and for the future.